Welcome, everyone. I am Ken Clairbout, K4ZW, and on behalf of the Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation, I'm glad you could join us this evening for our presentation. We're taking a slight divergence from some topics that we normally cover in this webinar series, and we're going to be hitting on VHF tonight. And as you may have seen, we've got another VHF webinar coming up. It's something I've been wanting to hit on for the last couple of years. We've done a few, but something I'd like to maybe stress a little bit more. Something that's growing in popularity, so we hope you'll enjoy this one. And if you have any suggestions for future webinars that related to VHF contesting, I'd be glad to take your suggestions, topic, anyone doing the presentation, whatever. I would certainly welcome your input. The Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation, www.WWROF.org, is responsible for these webinars. They provide the funding to bring these to you. And if you're a contester, I'd encourage you to go check out their webpage if you haven't already. Look at all the neat stuff they're doing. Lots of good information there. All of these webinars are recorded, and they will be posted on the webpage there. And if you're so moved, I'm sure they would welcome your financial support as well. We will take questions at the end of the presentation. You can send them to us at any time, but just for the sake of keeping the flow of the presentation going, I hold the questions until the end, and then we'll go over those. There's a questions box. You can just type in your question, hit return, and we'll hold it until the end of the presentation. So our guest this evening, really, I think most everyone knows, Joel Harrison, W5ZN. Joel was first licensed as Whiskey November 5 India Golf Fox in 1972. His first contest was the old ARRL CD party in 1973. His interest later turned to VHF contesting, finally breaking into the top 10 in the ARRL June VHF contest in 1993. In June of '96, he won first place in the single op category, setting a new world record under the call sign WB5IGF. In 1998, he returned to June contest as W5ZN, once again winning first place and breaking his previous 1996 record. In 2001, he won first place single op in the ARRL UHF contest, and in 2011, the W5ZN team won first place in the limited multi-op category of the ARRL June VHF contest. W5ZN was a team member of the record-setting WA8 Whiskey Zulu Golf Contest team in 1999 and 2000, and the K1 Whiskey Hotel Sugar team that finished first in the multi-op category of the 2010 ARRL September VHF contest, outing multi-year winner W2 Sugar Zulu. W5ZN is also active in HF contests. In the 2006 ARRL DX contest, he set a new 80-meter CW record for the W5 call area that held until 2009. In 2011, he reclaimed that record that still holds today. Joel holds 10-band DXCC, 11-band VUCC, is an A1 operator, and served as ARRL president from 2006 until 2010, when he retired from ARRL elected service after 27 years. He's published many antenna articles in VHF, UHF microwave conference proceedings, including co-author of the W1GHZ microwave antenna book, and design, construction, and evaluation of the 8 vertical circle array for low band receiving in the March-April 2010 issue of QEX. In 2014, he was awarded the ARRL Medal of Honor for outstanding service to amateur radio. So it is my pleasure to give us Joel Harrison, W5ZN, a guy I know mostly from the other end of the RF spectrum on 80 and 160 meters, but I'm glad he was able to take the time to be with us and talk to us about VHF contesting. So Joel, floor is yours, go for it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ken. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and excited to have the opportunity here to tell a little bit about VHF contesting. You know, that covers a wide range of activity, and it's somewhat difficult to compress it down into a like a brief, maybe 1-hour presentation, but we have a lot of information we're going to talk about this evening. We're going to talk about station basics and some propagation, how to deal with some noise you might have at your station equipment, antennas, and then some contest operating. We're not going to talk about rovers tonight. My good buddy Rick K1DS is going to have a seminar, which you mentioned, coming up on rovers. So we're not going to talk about that tonight. We'll leave that to Rich. So I want to get started tonight. I want to talk a little bit about some of the expectations for VHF contesting. And if I can get, there we go. You know, there's some expectations that folks need to think about when you're either an old dog at VHF contesting, and looking over the folks that are in here tonight, I see some old dogs, some seasoned veterans, and some new folks as well. And there's some expectations in VHF contesting that we need to keep in mind. The advantages are they offer some magic bands for us. I mean, if you spend any time on the VHF bands, you know, due to some unique propagation characteristics, those bands can go from flat dead to wide open in just a matter of a few minutes or a few seconds. You can get super results from average stations. It's great activity to obtain some new operating awards, and it offers some real intense excitement when the bands open up. One of the disadvantages that I always have to point out, and a lot of times if someone is very active with HF contesting and they give VHF contesting a try, the QSO rates are not normally as continuous as they are on HF on 2 meters and above. They can be on 6. So you just need to kind of keep that in mind when if you're someone migrating over from HF contesting. So what contests are available here? ARRL sponsors 3 major contests throughout the year, one in January, one in June, and one in September. And CQ sponsors their July contest annually. There are many other smaller events throughout the year that provide you know, some focused operating activity or a focused event, which are really good to participate in. But these are really the big 4 contests that we have. Now, coming up just this weekend, my all-time favorite is the June VHF contest that ARRL sponsors. You know, in my opinion, and that of many others, this is the premier VHF contest of the year. It's scheduled for this particular period in June simply because it occurs during the peak of the sporadic E season. And that offers some very enhanced 6-meter propagation that migrates up to 2 meters as well. There's excellent weather conditions for roving or mountaintop operating as well. In a lot of the countries, it's hotter than Hades down here in the south right now in Arkansas, which presents some challenges. But in a lot of other parts of the country, there's some very, very good good weather conditions. I want to point out something, some very key features about this contest now, this year in June. There are always a good group of folks that are going out roving to rare areas or stations that are going to be on from different maybe DXCC countries. This weekend, right now, and this weekend, we have Oscar Juliet Zero Bravo that's on the air from Alond Island, who's been started up on 2-meter EME, and their own 2-meter EME. We're going to talk about that a little bit coming up. That you may want to take a look at. Ned Stearns A7A is down in Charlie 6. They're on EME also. They're on 2 meters. They're also on 6 meters. So you want to take a look in that direction for that one. And one that I'm really, really looking for is my buddy old Dave Patton, NN1N, is heading up into the northern tip of Maine, up into Fox November 67, and some of those grids right in that area. So I'm really going to be looking for him because Fox November 67 is a grid that, in fact, it's the only 6-meter grid that I need east of Salt Lake City. So some really good things. Ken, KB7Q, he's out there roaming around in some grids. So some unique things that are coming up, going to be happening this weekend. So let's talk a little bit about some of these bands and what's really important. You know, and I'm not going to focus so much here either on the microwave bands. Those are sort of unique for a lot of us. We've focused our attention on 6 meters, 2 meters, 222, and 432. And a lot of stations still use the microwave bands, but I'm going to focus just on those because those are really areas that we can spend some time on this evening and talk about improving the setup that you have on those bands. For 6 meters, you know, your major focus is going to be in a contest on this band. 50.125 is the calling frequency. A lot of the activity is going to center around there, but spread out during a contest, you'll find stations all the way up to 50.200 and above on single sideband. Below that, down around 50.080 to 50.105 is where a lot of CW is going to be taking place. So 6 meters starts opening up. You need to look all over the band to see what's going on. This band can open unexpectedly. Those of you who are seasoned operators that are with us here tonight know this from heart, that you can be sitting there looking at a dead band and all of a sudden with sporadic E, that band can pop open. And this is, I can't emphasize this enough. If you want to get on in the contest and play around, if you have the ability to keep one radio dedicated on 6 meters, do that, because that's vitally important. And it's going to provide you with the most cues and the most multipliers during a contest. 2 meters is the second most important band. 144, 200 is the center of activity. But make sure you listen up and down. You know, well, I say 25 kilohertz here. It really depends on your population density. I know some of our folks up in the Northeast, you know, you have a lot of folks on, and that makes extend broader than that. Down here where the population's not so dense with folks on the air, you don't have to listen so wide. Keep in mind that sporadic E can extend to 2 meters. So if you start seeing some intense 6 meter sporadic E, one of the errors a lot of folks make during contesting when sporadic E gets real intense on 6 meters, we kind of fail to keep an eye on 2 meters. And you know, if you're a single operator, it's difficult to try to keep up with 2 bands, especially if you're running in the heat of the battle on 6 meters. But keep an eye on 2 meters, because boy, it can open up. And last June, we actually saw that. We had a pretty good sporadic E opening that extended to 2 meters, and were able to work quite a few stations at a significant distance off. I always like to define 432 megahertz as the third most important band, simply because of the activity that you see there. I always see a lot of folks that'll have 432 that won't have 222 megahertz down here in the area where I live in Arkansas. But don't forget 222 megahertz. It may not be as populated as the other 3 bands, 6, 2, and 432, but there's plenty of activity in the populated areas there. So let's talk just very briefly here about categories. You know, categories in VHF contests, you always have your standard single op and your multi-op categories. There are some unique categories in VHF contesting which provide an opportunity for a large number of folks to participate in these contests. We have the rover category. Like I say, Rick's going to talk about that here, I think, in a week or two. The rover category is a very popular category for contesting, and it provides folks who may live in areas with antenna restrictions or that can't put up a station at their house an opportunity to go out and be a very, very popular part of the contest. I love rovers. I mean, man, they can give you some grids that just aren't out there from home stations. So I love rovers. Some other unique categories are like a single op 3-band category and FM only. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about FM toward the latter part here of the presentation. And of course, just simply to review, the contest exchange is grid squares. I think everyone is very familiar with grid squares, even if you're just an HF operator, because those have become part of a few HF contests for distance scoring. All right, I want to spend a little time here talking about station basics. You know, on 6 meters, the equipment available is a radio or a transverter. I don't know that there's an HF radio that you can purchase today that does not have 6 meters on it. And that has really helped 6 meter operation because you have a radio that you buy for HF and it has 6 meters on it. It's very easy to get it online. But if you don't have 6 meters on your radio, transverters are readily available and they work very, very well. You know, 50 watts is great. Most of the radios that you have today with 6 meters on them is 100 watts, and that's outstanding. And I always like to mention this. I mean, a 3-element antenna up at least 30 feet is good. Now, that's not optimum, but it's good. And I know stations that work a lot of real good stuff with a simple antenna like this. So, and in fact, if you're sitting out there and you don't have a 6 meter antenna up right now, if you have a 15-meter antenna, give that a try. You might be surprised at how well that thing will work for you. 2 meters, there are very, very few radios out there that come off the shelf with 2 meters on them, but you can buy transverters just about anywhere from any manufacturer today that works great. That's what I use on 2 meters. I have a K3 that I use with a Down East microwave transverter, and it is an outstanding setup. Greater than 50 watts with a 13-element beam at 50 feet is going to work great for you. On 222 or 432, you need at least 50 watts. Get some more if you can. 16-element, 25-element antennas at 50 feet are very, very good. You know, the thing about VHF antennas is the boom lengths are relatively short compared to some of the big HF antennas, but you can pack in a lot of gain on one particular antenna with that. I want to talk about noise. Man, I'll tell you what, I can't overemphasize this, and it's something that I struggle with continually to make sure that that noise is just simply as low as possibly can here in my station. And the one thing that I try to impress upon folks is that the grim reaper of noise is not your friend. If you like to plug that antenna into your radio and you hear a lot of noise and you think, man, that's great, well, it may not be. You know, you need to stop and take a look at that. You know, we struggle with sky noise, which we don't have a lot of control over, atmospheric noise that we don't have a lot of control over, but things like line noise and man-made noise, while we don't have really a lot of control over those, we do have some things available to us to address these issues. I want to tell you a little bit about a problem that I had that just killed me for a while, and that was from internet router noise. The internet network system that I have here in my house and in the station is both a wired and a wireless system. You know, we have a wireless system all over the house, but I also have a wired system that feeds a lot of computers in the shack and everything. And I struggled with a significant noise source on 6 meters for quite some time. And I would have an entire band populated with multiple carriers, you know, that would show up all over the place, plus a lot of broadband trash. And I tried everything in the world to try to resolve this, because, you know, rule number one is you got to get your own station clean first here. So we were having I guess it was back about 2010, 2011, I guess, during the June VHF contest. We had a multi-op going on here at W5ZN, and we had some of this problem on 6 meters. And I was lamenting about it and whining about it. And Ward Silver in 0AX was down here, one of the operators at that time, and he said, you know what, you need to take a look at some information from Jim Brown, K9YC, and see if that might help. And I actually looked at an article that I'm going to show you here on the next slide from Jim, and I studied that article, and it was information that never had clicked with me before about toroids and being able to suppress noise. And I read Jim's article through a couple of times, and it made sense with me, and I applied those techniques, and the results were impressive. Some of the results that I experienced here was that all birdies were gone. Every birdie that I had on the 6-meter band was gone. But one thing that just made my jaw drop was the fact that I noticed an 8 dBm drop in my noise floor. Now, you know, that's significant, and I just couldn't believe it. Well, take note here on this. Some of you may already had. It's by Jim Brown, K9YC, A Ham's Guide to RFI, Ferrites, Balance, and Audio. And there's the link on the screen. And this worked extremely well for me. And I wrote an article about how I applied these techniques that was published in the Central States VHF Society Proceedings in 2011, or 2012, I guess. And it really, really improved my situation, allowed me to hear some stations down in the noise that otherwise we weren't able to hear. So just remember that if you get into a noise problem, there are some solutions out there for them. It's going to require some effort on your part, but it's vitally important that you apply these. Now, some of the other noise issues that we deal with, like line noise and other noise, can't be eliminated with toroids. So, you know, you have some devices available like the DX Engineering NCCC1 or the MFJ 1026 that will allow you to do some noise canceling. So just remember, if you have a noise problem, and we really struggle down here in the South with a lot of line noise, just from the extreme heat that we have in the summertime, and some of these options that are available to you can really, really work. I want to talk about propagation here, and you know what you can expect. I've already mentioned briefly sporadic E, and its magic. It's magic that it offers to a band like 6 meters and even 2 meters. We also have tropospheric ducting, meteor scatter, and even EME. I'm going to talk about EME because I really don't believe that in today's environment everyone is taking advantage of EME, and even with a modest station. So we're going to talk a little bit about each one of these. You know, sporadic E is sporadic ionization of the E layer. It peaks from May to July, and that's why I mentioned the June contest is scheduled to coincide with what we predict to be the peak of the sporadic E season. There's been a lot of research about what causes sporadic E, and when we say sporadic E, we're talking about sporadic ionization of the E layer. Could be generated by lightning, cloud-to-sky lightning. It's most prominent on 50 megahertz, extends to 2 meters, and can actually possibly occur on 222. As you can see here, I've noted some of the single hop optimum ranges that are possible. Double hop is quite significant, and I'll tell you what's really frustrating for me as an operator, sitting here in Arkansas with a sporadic E cloud right over me and listening to stations on the East Coast, workstations way out west, and I can't take advantage of it. But that's the luck of the draw. Peak time is during daylight and early evening. Just remember that. Peak time is daylight hours and early evening. Here's a little pictorial of exactly sporadic E. See a little sporadic E cloud there, and normally you know, your signals will shoot up into the F layer. When you have a sporadic E cloud form, you get reflected back to the Earth. Tropo. Everyone's experienced some tropospheric ducting in their life, whether it's been on VHF weak signal work or or maybe some other digital or FM work. These are just natural atmospheric ducts that form due to temperature inversion, and they'll shuffle the VHF, UHF radio waves long distances. These occur on all bands. You know, anytime, mostly during warm weather months. I've experienced tropo on bands all the way up to 10 gig. It's just a little pictorial about tropospheric ducting to give you a little idea of its propagation. Meteor scatter. This is one of my favorite topics that I like to talk about because I love to take advantage of it during a VHF contest. You know, during every VHF contest, I always run some skeds with a lot of stations back out east. You know, I always run with Jeff, K1TEO, the W3CCX guys, and a lot of guys during contests, and we always complete. And that's a way to really optimize your score, is by taking advantage of this. Meteor scatter is simply a reflection of a radio wave from ionized trails from meteors or other space junk that's burning up in the upper atmosphere. This occurs about 65 miles up in the atmosphere, and you can make QSOs up to about 1,400 miles with this. Here's a little pictorial for meteor scatter, and from the range of about 50 to 75 miles up in the atmosphere, if you have a meteor or some space junk that is tangent to this arc in between that range, you'll get an ionized layer that will reflect a radio wave back and allow you to complete a QSO. 6 meters and 2 meters are the real big areas that we focus on with meteor scatter. It is possible on 222. However, the burns are a lot faster on 222, and they don't last as long for the ionization. So if you're going to focus on 222, that really doesn't provide much of an opportunity during a contest. But if you hit some of the premier meteor showers like the Perseids in August, you can really focus on 222 and get some folks to run with you, and you can pick up some new grids or new states on 222 that time. These are very predictable paths. This happens between midnight and about 9 a.m. So what you're going to see during a contest is stations that will be running meteor skeds, you know, in the wee hours of the morning, midnight, like I say, to 9 a.m. So if you get into that time, which is usually known as a dead time for the VHF contests, from midnight, you know, into 4 or 5 a.m. It's a good time to pick up some meteor scatter skeds. You'll find a lot of stations on calling CQ or looking for stations to work. I want to talk briefly here about equipment. Let's talk about antennas, preamplifiers, one of my favorite topics to talk about, and amplifiers. You know, as I mentioned a bit before, VHF antennas are small in comparison to HF antennas. The boom lengths can still be pretty large, 30 to 50 feet. You know, I have a number of VHF antennas that have 30-foot booms. I have 2 6-meter antennas that have 50-foot long booms. But the elements are very small and much smaller in diameter as compared to an HF antenna. One of the key things that I really like to focus on with antennas is that antenna stacking for added gain is much easier on VHF than it is on HF, and you can really get some advantage from that. Here's just a shot talking about stacking antennas. This is some modeling. Over on the left is a single 3-element antenna at 30 feet. You know, as I mentioned, this works. It works very, very well and will perform good. But if you go over and compare that to the graph, to the modeling chart on the right, where you have a stack of 7-element antennas. These are 6-meter antennas, 7 elements. The boom length is about 25 feet or so. Not all that large of an antenna, but man, look at what you can do with stacking these antennas. You can get a significant improvement on gain, and you don't take up a lot of area. You know, it never fails. People always ask, what's the best height for my antenna? And I really like to hear hams think about that and what they can do with their antenna systems, how high they need to get them. But, you know, regardless of how high you have your antenna, you need to always keep in mind you're always going to have nulls and dead zones regardless of the height. So, you know, you just want to get your antennas as high as you reasonably can. You know, as hams, we just have a number of factors that are going to dictate how high we can put our antenna. But don't, and I want to re-emphasize this, don't rule out if you can put up a 6-meter antenna 30 feet high. Don't think that's not going to work. Get out there and put that thing up and get it as high as you reasonably can. Now, antenna rule number 1 is really that you need to get your VHF antennas above the tree line. And that's important for 2 meters and above. Understanding that's not always the case, this is an optimum thing to do. If you can get those antennas above the tree line, you're going to experience some phenomenal results. Here is just to give you an idea of what we're talking about nulls and dead zones. Here is a single 7-element Yagi for 6 meters. And I have in the upper left is that antenna at 25 feet. Then if you go down to the one right below it, that's the same antenna at 50 feet. I'm sorry. If you go out to the right of that is that same antenna at 37.5 feet. Then on down in the lower left, the same antenna at 50 feet. Then in the lower right is the same antenna at 100 feet. Now, if you take a look at the gain here, there's not a significant amount of difference in the gain by having the antenna a lot higher. But what you see is a significant amount of nulls as you get higher. Those may or may not come into play. That's going to depend a good deal on the arrival angle of the signal coming in that you're trying to receive. But I point this out simply to emphasize the fact that getting an antenna on 6 meters up 30 feet has some advantages, and you don't have to go significantly higher for it to really have an effective station. If you really want to improve things and start stacking antennas, that's optimum. But, you know, get out there and, again, if you don't have an antenna right now for 6 meters that's in the air and you can put that thing up 30 feet, man, give it a try. You're going to be surprised at some of the results that you're going to have. Aiming your antennas is quite a bit more important at VHF than you may have experienced on HF. It's critical. And unless two stations are aimed very close to each other, you're just most likely going to fail in trying to complete a QSO. It's just because of a number of factors with you know, the conditions of the bands, the propagation, the sharpness of the angle, and all sorts of things. I mentioned preamps, one of my premier topics that I really have a lot of fun talking about. Now, I always like to mention that a preamp may not be needed unless your receiver has a really bad noise figure. And that's always followed up by a question, what is a bad noise figure? And that is sometimes complicated to quantify because your total system noise figure depends more on antenna and sky temperature. That's going to dominate. You can't change those things. But at VHF and above, and this is the thing I really will have to emphasize, VHF and above, gain is not as important as a low noise figure. I mean, if just remember that. And I'm going to give you some examples here. If we assume that the sky temperature and antenna temperature is the same, don't focus on 3,000 degree Kelvin, but let's assume it's the same. So if you have a receiver noise figure of 20 dB and you add a preamp that only has 12 dB of gain, but has a noise figure of 2 dB, you'll improve your system noise figure by 10 dB. If you're interested, I can send you all the math for this offline. But just remember this. Here you've got a preamp that has only 12 dB of gain, but a 2 dB noise figure. You're going to improve your entire system noise figure by 10 dB. So let's take a look here. If you thought, okay, my receiver noise figure is 10 dB, quite a bit better than the example right above, and you add a preamp with 25 dB of gain. I mean, I've seen hams say, oh, wow, it's got 25 dB gain. Whoa. But what's its noise figure? In this situation, if it has a noise figure of 10 dB, you're going to improve your system noise figure by 0, and you're going to cause other problems with this high gain preamp. So just keep in mind that when it comes to preamps, that you really need to focus on noise figure. So here's the bottom line on preamps. About 90% of the entire received noise figure is determined by the noise figure of the first stage after the antenna. So think about this for a minute. What's the first stage after the antenna? It's our coax, right? Our feed line. Your coax loss can add directly to the receiver noise figure and can determine up to 90% of your entire system noise figure. Because the further down the line you get, you can't really start making up a lot of changes to it. Preamp rule number 2. Every time you cut your system noise figure in half, you gain about 3 dB in signal-to-noise ratio until you're limited by the sky temperature and antenna noise. 3 dB. Everybody remembers what 3 dB is, right? 3 dB, that's a factor of 2. Here's number 3. Preamp rule of thumb number 3. Mass mounting a preamp is like bringing the RX front end right to the top of the tower. And that's why you'll see a lot of the very successful VHF guys, especially on 2 meters and above in frequency, will have preamps out at the antennas. So what this really boils down to in simplicity is on 6 meters, you don't really need a preamp unless your radio is really deaf. Now, that's always followed up by, oh, which radios are those? Just about all of them. You know, I don't, you're probably going to need a preamp on any manufactured radio right now that has 6 meters on it. And I'll tell you why. Most manufacturers will produce an outstanding radio with a focus on HF. And when it comes to 6 meters, that's an add-on. The radio is going to perform exceptionally well on 6 meters, but you're going to need a preamp, most likely, to beef it up a little bit. And that can be down in the shack at the radio. For 2 meters, it's really recommended. A lot of if you're using a transverter, a lot of the Down East microwave transverters have exceptional noise figures, and their front ends are very good. And you can probably get by without one, but it's recommended. 222 and 432, it's strongly recommended. All right, amplifiers. Everybody likes more power, right? QRO. Before you sink a lot of money into a high power amplifier, man, learn the real facts about gain. To begin with, in VHF contesting, or any contesting for that matter, you only need an amplifier if you want to enter the high power category. And you need to understand there are no multi-band VHF, UHF amplifiers. Now we're starting to see some HF amplifiers come out with that have 6 meters on them. I know that one of the Ameritron solid-state amplifiers, the 1306, now has 6 meters on it. I believe Elecraft has 6 meters on their one of their amplifiers, and a few others out there are available. But that's just 6 meters. You're not going to get 2 meters and above. So if you think you're going to, you want to get into buying amplifiers for your VHF station, you're looking at buying an amplifier for each band, and that can get very expensive. But remember, outstanding gain can be achieved by stacking antennas and may negate the need for an amplifier. I want to spend some time here talking about contest operating and the digital modes. Joe Taylor, K1JT, developed a program here several years ago that we referred to as WSJT, which simply stood for Weak Signal JT. This offers specific digital protocols that are optimized for what's first optimized for meteor scatter and later employed for EME at VHF and UHF. Now, I know that there are a lot of folks that are using these on HF right now, but Joe's original intent was on VHF. These are free open source programs, and they require really a standard transceiver and a personal computer with a sound card, and you're pretty much on the air. This can provide outstanding access to new grids and multipliers in a contest from moderate stations. Two specific modes I want to focus on: FSK 441 for meteor scatter and JT65 for EME. The one thing that I really like to emphasize that a lot of stations are overlooking, that this provides EME for single Yagi stations. Here's a screenshot of the FSK 441 screen for meteor scatter. I believe for those of you that are seasoned VHF guys here tonight, you're familiar with this. You're familiar with this screen. And even those that are new, there's a lot of information on Joe's website that you can look at, so I won't go into a lot of detail. But, you're looking at the screen here, and you're seeing up in the upper part of the screen some meteor bursts, and they're being decoded. Really provides some outstanding results. Meteor scatter, as I said, it's FSK 441 mode. There's specific calling frequencies for this: 50.260 on 6 meters and 144.140 on 2 meters. If you have a single antenna and 100 watts, that's outstanding. You can make meteor scatter contacts. It's important here to point out, because it's going to be different when I talk about EME. For meteor scatter, your antenna is pointed toward the station. Or if I back up just a second here, if you look down in the lower left-hand corner where the date and time is, you'll notice that there are 3 areas there. One's highlighted that says Hot A 244. Then you have an azimuth. That will give you, sometimes you may want to be skewed just slightly off a direct path due to the inclination of the meteor burn, but the program will tell you that. This is not significant, not important. Bottom line is you need to point toward the station that you're trying to work. These are 30-second sequences, so you'll call for 30 seconds and you'll listen for 30 seconds. Normally, the easternmost station will run the first 30-second period, which is from 0 to 30 seconds during the 1-minute sequence, and then the western station will run the second period from 31 seconds to 0, back up to 0. there's specific procedures for running, and this is all spelled out in some of the material that you can download. But once calls are received, stations can start sending reports. Keep in mind that I noted stations during contest times are going to be on usually after 0500 Zulu. You can listen on 50.260 in monitor mode, and you'll see stations that are calling CQ. One thing I want to point out, you may hear stations calling CQ. If you hear a station and you decode it, and it's, for example, CQ, W5ZN, and then my grid square EM45, followed by U5 or D10, for example, this means that I'm listening, that I'm calling CQ on that calling frequency, but I'm listening up 5, U5, up 5, or down 10, D10. So that means I'm calling CQ, but rather than clutter up the calling frequency, I'm listening up and down. So you would call up 5 or down 10, however, as I instruct. And then what would happen once I hear you, that's where I'm listening, I would start transmitting down there. I really would like to see several more stations in the United States really give EME a try. It's extremely popular in Europe because they have learned that you can use smaller antennas. You know, kind of the here in the United States, we have this I guess opinion that to do EME you need these huge monster arrays that we've seen and read about for years. That used to be the case years ago when we didn't have very good preamps, we didn't have very good equipment, we were trying to use CW. But now with Joe's program, we have the opportunity to really work smaller installations. I run 4 antennas on EME, 4 17-element antennas, and I can elevate those. And I have worked a number of single and 2 Yagi stations that are out there all over the world. Here up on this screen is the JT65 screen, and this shows a recent contact that I made with a D-Expedition in Malawi, 7Q7 EME. They were running 2 small Yagis and only about 300 watts of power. And this contact was very possible. You basically have 2 screens that you keep a look at. The screen on the left is showing you all of the signals on a particular frequency that are calling. In this case, there are about 4 stations that are calling the 7Q7 stations that I clearly see and can hear and can decode. Down on the bottom, if you go to this link, www.chris.org/cgi-bin/JT65EMEA, this is where the EME guys hang out when they're on the air and they have Moon. If you forget this link or don't write it down, just simply Google N0 UK Ping Jockey and go to the JT65 page. But what I really want to try to encourage here is if you have a single Yagi and 200 or 300 watts, give this a try. Even if you cannot elevate your antenna, if you have a fixed antenna, catch the moon on a moonrise or a moon set. Your single antenna will be good from 0-degree elevation right when at moonrise all the way up to probably 12 or 15 degrees. You may see a little null in there, but I guarantee you with that station you can make some contacts. Same thing when the moon sets. Point your antenna at the moon, not at the station you're trying to work. You'll need something to track the moon, find out where it is. There are a number of programs available. This particular one is called MoonSced by GM4JJJ, It's the one that I currently use, but there are several out there. And in fact, if you download the WSJT software package on the JT65 mode, it actually will track the moon for you. It has a little window that shows you where the moon is. Just for clarification, you'll see if you look at this, there's several JT65 modes. For 2 meters, JT65 Bravo is the mode that is used. And stations will be operating anywhere from 144.110 all the way up to maybe 140, somewhere in there. But if you go to the N0 UK chat page, you'll see stations that will be posting where they're operating. There are no calling frequencies, and as I said, single antenna, 100 watts. You can work big stations, more antennas, more power, more success. 2 antennas, and these don't have to be big antennas. I work a lot of stations that are like, they have 2 9-element antennas running 300 watts. They got good signals. These are 1-minute sequences where you'll transmit for 1 minute, and then you'll listen for 1 minute. And there's a procedure that we go through. Once you receive calls, you send O's. On EME, the report is O's, O-O-O. Been that way for years. That's the procedure. After you receive O's, you send RO, which means Roger, and you're sending O's. Then you complete with Rogers. But you can find this on the web, the procedure. Here's the location. If you don't have this software, you're not familiar with it, you can just Google K1JT or Google WSJT. It's on Joe's website. It's free. You download it, put it on your computer, get it set up, and be good to go. Just in closing here, let me mention a couple of things, general things. You know, if the bands are dead, you know, it's very difficult to sit there forever listening to a dead band. So how do you monitor a dead band for unpredictable band openings? It's a number of ways. If your radio has a pan adapter, you can keep an eye on that. CW Skimmer can alert you as well. ON4 KST Region 2 50 meg chat for 6 meters. I like DX Sherlock. Just Google DX Sherlock. That'll give you a graphical presentation of who's working who. And you can keep an eye on your DX cluster. Now, just remember, if you're in a contest and if you're operating in a category that doesn't allow you to use a lot of these things, keep that in mind. And just a couple of last things here about contest operating. Read the rules. Different contests have different rules. Some allow assistance for single ops, some don't. Don't assume they're all the same. And the band will not be open continuously or with any certainty. So monitor and listen, and when you get through monitoring and listening, monitor and listen some more. I mentioned 2 meter FM a little bit earlier. Look, guys, I mean, a lot of times if we're big HF operators or we're big VHF wig signal guys, FM is kind of viewed as a 4-letter word for us. Well, you know, in VHF contesting, there are no mode-specific contests. When you get on in a VHF contest, and all of those that I mentioned, you can use any mode. That's why I will make contacts on single sideband. I'll make contacts on CW. I'll make digital contacts with the JT modes. And I'll work some FM. I'll work a lot of the local guys in the club that all they have is an FM HT, but they want to get on the air, they want to work some contacts, and they'll get on. Those cues count, and they can add up very nicely. And here's a key point I want to emphasize. This can excite a local club and introduce them to either weak signal VHF or to contesting. They get to be a part of a big winning team. I always get my local club here, which is basically a repeater club, fired up for the June VHF contest. And those guys want to go out roving. They want to get on the air and make some contacts, simply because I said, guys, get on the air. We can have a lot of fun. And I found out they really love it. Give a presentation at your local club. You know, most new hams have an HT, and they can get on the air and make some contacts with you. Where can you learn more? VHF conferences and microwave update. There are a number of conferences throughout the year in different parts of the country. These are not traditional ham fests. They're technical conferences. They publish proceedings, which is a compilation of technical papers. So if you're not familiar with these, get into one, get familiar with them, and go attend one. You will greatly appreciate it. And Ken, I believe that is my very last slide. So
okay.
I'm more than happy to address any questions may be out there.
Okay, very good, Joel. So we've got a couple things have come in, but if you have a question for him, go ahead and you may have to hit on the plus sign of the question box. It'll expand it. You can put your question in and make sure you hit send. We'll pick it up here and pass it on to Joel. All right. The first one comes from Thomas, Alpha Charlie 9 Bravo, Japan. He mentions the RFI article seems to be 404D. I think maybe that was the K9YC page. I just did a quick Google search on K9YC and chokes or RFI, and there's some links that come up. So if that's the page he was referring to, if what you had there maybe has been changed, quick Google check should pull that up. Yeah, if you've got the page there, I just want to make sure I'm addressing the whole thing.
I think the article, Jim may have changed the link, and I'm glad you mentioned that and brought that up because I need to take a look at that. A ham's guide to RFI, ferrites, balance, and audio interfacing is what you're looking for. I'll verify this. Thanks for letting me know. If that's a broken link, I want to get that corrected in my presentation. But Google K9YC, and that should come up. Did you see that one, Ken, somewhere, that article?
Whoops. K9YC.com has a bunch of stuff on there, so you can find it off that webpage as well. But if you want to get a shortcut, I would just say Google and K9YC and RFI or K9YC and chokes. It should take you directly to that article. So, Don, November 4, Tango Zulu Hotel mentions that JT65 has been really active on 50.276 recently. So those of you that want to try that, I'm going to check that frequency as well. Any other comments on that, Joel? Or?
No, that's good. Thanks for that info.
Okay, Bart, W9JJ says, hey, old friend, don't forget the Mountain Lake ARPS to monitor for potential 2-meter E-skip.
Hey, Bart, man, great to have you in here tonight, buddy. Thanks for that. And, I had that in part of a previous presentation, and I didn't pull it over. Ken, if you would, mention that link, because what this does is this will give you a map of the entire United States. And I believe it's based on some APRS stuff, but it will give you an immediate current graphical representation of what areas are open on the VHF bands to others. So thanks, Bart. Man, I appreciate that, buddy.
Okay, here's one from Mark, K9 Gulf X-Ray, operating with the K9 LAS limited multi-op this weekend from Echo Mike 68. And his question is, any guess as to how many 6-meter E-skip openings may be this weekend? He said, I've been listening, and it's been dead. Thanks for the great presentation. He said FM QSOs are a great idea as well.
Wow, a prediction here. Let's see. Yeah, the band. I've
and we're going to hold you to it too.
I've been disappointed, but you know what? I'm going to tell you right quick. I've found in recent years that a lot of times the bands will open, and we're all sitting there listening, and it's like, wow, we had an opening and we didn't even know it. I'm going to predict 24 sporadic openings this weekend.
All right.
Now here's the catch to that. Who's the catch? Who's going to be the judge of that? Probably me, so I'll be right on.
Yeah, there you go. All right, and Mark also said, by the way, you didn't mention 6-meter FM beacons. Any particular? being relatively new to 6, the particular area to be looking for those?
Well, not just that, and thanks, Mark. That's a great idea. Not just the beacons. The CW beacons are down about, excuse me, they're below 50.080. If the band's dead, if you can keep an eye on 50.060 or so, 070 to 080, man, you'll see some beacons pop up out of the noise and give you an idea of what's open to a particular area. It's a great suggestion, Mark. Thank you very much. And I'll be looking for you guys this weekend.
Okay. That looks like that's it. Just drag my heels a bit in case anything else comes in. But, what you said about 6, and as I was telling Joel before we started this, that I'm kind of getting back into 6 meters here again. I moved to a new QTH, and I've got a 5-element Yagi up at 30 feet, just kind of like what he mentioned. And I happened to be home, I guess it was last week, one day, and found the band open, a couple of beacons, 1 or 2 guys. But it just seemed like, I guess during the day it was difficult. A lot of people were gone, but the band was open. There just wasn't any activity, and I don't know if anyone wasn't listening or what, but that's why, especially a contest weekend like this coming weekend, is so important, because there's a lot of activity. So, okay, Joel, looks like you've answered all the questions. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, that's it. I greatly appreciate everyone being here. Like I say, I scanned over the list of who's in, and a lot of good friends here, and some newcomers. So looking forward to seeing everyone this weekend in the contest. Good luck to all.
Okay, well, Joel, appreciate it very much. Guys, make sure you thank Joel for pulling this together. He's a very busy guy. I'm glad we were able to sneak this in before the contest this weekend, but he's got a lot going on, and I'm just very grateful he took the time to pull the presentation together and be here tonight. Also, he did mention on the front end of this about Rick K1DS and his upcoming webinar on roving. If you haven't seen the announcement for it, you haven't registered, or you want to pass it along to your friends, the link to register should be up on www.WWROF. That's the Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation.org. On their webpage, there's a webinar link on the top, and the registration link for that should be available off the webpage. So again, that's also where we archive these recorded webinars. So if you want to see any bits of it again, or you got friends, pass the word, please let everyone know. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks again, Joel, for your excellent presentation, and good luck everyone this weekend, and we'll see you later this month when Rick K1DS is with us. Take care, everyone. So long. Bye-bye.
7-3 all.